Today on the Higher Grounds podcast, we're going to be talking to Jason Williams. Jason Williams is the director for North Carolina Faith and Freedom. He's going to be talking about Christians being involved in the political process, not just in the state of North Carolina, but in our nation as a whole. You stay tuned to the Higher Grounds podcast. Good day. Welcome back to the Higher Grounds podcast. Thank you for joining me this morning. It's a blessing for us to come into your living room or car or whatever particular venue you're listening or watching the podcast owner from. We thank you for joining us today. It's our privilege every week to address you at 6 a.m. With new material, and we hope that it's been a blessing and a help to you. If it has, comment upon it, share, and get the word out that we may reach as many people as we possibly can while we have this medium and the ability to be able to do it. Well, I'm joined with a couple of friends of mine today. These are not our normal guys on the set of the podcast, but we're grateful that they're here. Brother Matthew Tucker, he's been the
Morning.
He's been the faceless guy, the voice you hear behind the camera
sir.
that rings out, in an echoey sort of a way. But hey, how you doing, Bo?
I'm doing good. Preacher, doing real good. Good to be here this morning.
Good to have you on set.
Yes, sir.
How are things going over to the church?
Well, everything right now seems to be going good.
Right.
But I have talked to some pastors, and they said, Brother Matt, you'll be the last to know if it's not going good.
Right, right. Well, that's
right
true.
now, it's going good.
So you don't know anything,
Nothing.
and do you want to know anything?
No, sir.
Okay.
I'm happy. I'm doing pretty good right now, so hopefully we can keep it that way.
Well, the
until at
happiest
least
people in the
Monday
world
morning.
are folks that know nothing.
That's exactly right.
That's right.
I
So
say amen.
you're
to that.
happy, right?
Happy.
Praise the Lord.
Happy.
Happy. Amen. I'm glad to hear it. Now, you've been there 4 years?
4 years. Yes, sir. August was 4 years.
It's hard to imagine.
It is. Time has flown by fast.
That is hard to imagine
Yes,
to
sir.
me that you've been there that long.
Yes, sir.
You've been talking to old Stevie Steve?
I have. I talked to him a little bit yesterday, and
Yeah.
he wanted to FaceTime me while we was driving down the road. And
Did he?
I told him, I said, Preacher, that's not safe.
No, it's
I'm
not
trying
good.
to want a video chat.
Did you see Dr. Dex do he did a morning minute meditation here?
While driving, I wanted to comment and say, Jesus, take the wheel, but I didn't know how. Yes, sir.
In the morning minute meditation, he said, I want to give you a thought that just hit my mind today. And I said to myself, you fix something else fixing to hit you here in a second.
Yes, sir. Very dangerous.
Filming while you're riding down the road. Well, that's Dr. Dex. Lord gives him particularly special guardian angels. They have to swap out about every 6 months. But
Like Paul's prisoner guards.
yeah, that's kind of how it is with Dr. Dex. Brother Jason Williams joining us on set today. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I guess as a Tennessee football fan.
I'm sorry.
And as a Christian, having to try to get through this season sober. It's not.
Yes, you'll have. And I know this is coming to you a few weeks later, but y'all have only had one game, right?
Yes. Yeah. Mercifully, so far one.
You mercifully,
and we'll see.
Georgia
how
State.
things go. Georgia State, and Georgia State could just be very underrated. I mean, we may look back and
They really are.
and they could be in the college football playoffs.
Yes.
So we may not know.
They may be the anomaly team
That's
of
right.
the century.
That's right, or maybe not.
Or
We don't know. But nevertheless, as a Christian, we're going to try to get through this.
Yes.
But I do appreciate you putting the strongest thing possible in this coffee cup.
Right, and that is H2O.
It is Thank you very
Water,
much.
for those of you who are not very chemistry minded, yes.
Yeah.
So 6 kids?
That's right. We've got 6 kids. I think it's the beard.
Yeah.
That's doing it. Yeah, she just can't keep her hands off of me. I don't know what to tell you. So,
Well, I'm telling you, Miss Shannon, she has got to have a special place in the kingdom of heaven for having to put up with you all these years.
I have no doubt.
Yes.
No doubt.
Yes.
But it's fun. It's a wild ride. They're great kids.
Now, you've been married about 18 years, if I remember right?
Wow, way to put me on the spot.
No, it is.
About 18 years.
No, it is. I'm almost positive because I've been here at Galilee 18.
Yeah.
I'm in my 19th year. And I think you and I met either right before you got married or right after you got married. But it was in a few short weeks of time.
Right. No, it has been 18 years. So right at that exact time. And
Wow.
you came and preached at the church.
I did.
At that time. That's right.
I did.
So,
I'll never forget that. When I got the invitation to go preach it at your home church, a well respected preacher that the three of us know called me on the phone. He said, "I understand you're going to preach at so and so." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, before you go," he said, "let me give you some fair warning." He said, "There's a young man there by the name of Jason Williams, and he's got a kind of a know-it-all sort of a personality about him, and he can really get on your nerves if you don't watch it. And I just want to prepare you about how to deal with him." I said, "Oh, I don't have any problem with people like that." So I got over there, and I really didn't find you to be that way. What I found you to be was a crass, sarcastic individual, and in you I found a kindred spirit.
Is there? And so 18 years later, we're doing this podcast.
We're doing this podcast,
That's right, yes.
and that's because we haven't been doing it but for a year now. So we would have done it earlier had it been
earlier. That's right.
We sure would have.
Had the technology been available, we would have been doing this.
a long time ago, and it would have been in trouble.
Yes, we would have.
That's exactly right. But no, it's great to have you on.
Well, it's
great to have you on.
great
Have
to
you ever
be here.
met
Thank
Brother
you so
Jason?
much.
No, sir.
So
First
much.
time.
All right, well, let me give you a little tidbit here. All right, and Jason can give you the details. But you know how that you and I go up and we help Brother Melton at Light on the Mountain Youth Camp.
Yes, sir.
That's where Brother Jason got saved. Give us your testimony.
It is. Well, my family's from Knoxville, Knoxville, Tennessee, and
Hence the balls.
that's right. That's right. And so, but before I was born, my mom moved down here, and so I was born in Gastonia,
Yeah.
and so we visited a church when I was 12 years old, and the pastor came just real quick and said, "We'd like for your kids to go to the youth camp," and I had no desire to go to this youth camp. And he said, "I really want you to go." And my mom said, "Well, look, you're going to go to this youth camp. I really want you to go." And so my brother and I went. I was 12 years old. And as a 12-year-old boy at Light on the Mountain Youth Camp, it was August 8th, 1995. A young man at the time, I didn't really know him that well, Jesse Haley, answered the call to preach that night. And he got up and said he'd answer the call. And John Melton said, well, Jesse, if God called you to preach, you got to go and just preach right now. And I thought, oh, God, really?
Sound like John Melton.
Sounds just like him.
And so Jesse got...
And you'd already been sitting there for 2 hours.
Oh,
probably.
yeah.
Every bit of that.
Every bit of 2 hours. And, and this
And
is,
you'd
this
never
is-
been in church
and
hardly
this
at all.
is, well, this is Tuesday. Certainly not like this. And so this is Tuesday night of the youth camp. And so Jesse gets up and he preaches. And that night, God convicted my heart. And
Amen.
Jesse preached. And I accepted Christ that night and came back. And Jesse also was from Gastonia. And so came back and he really kind of took me under his wing. And we became really close. And so at our wedding, Jesse was my best man at our wedding. And went on and God really merged us together. And really, so he's actually out in South Dakota now, starting churches out in South Dakota. And so quick story, when he was on deputation, he was talking to, you were telling some funny stories a couple weeks ago on your podcast,
Right.
and I was listening to that. And so he was on deputation, and he was at one of these preachers' fellowships, and they asked him, they said, well, brother, and he was really young too, on deputation. They said, well, tell us about yourself. And he did, he's kind of telling these preachers about himself. And one of them said, well, what camps do you run in? He had no idea.
Yeah,
He didn't know what a camp was.
What camps?
He said, I don't know. And he looked at me and he walked away. And I said, what'd you tell him? He said, All I knew was Light on the Mountain.
Running Light on the Mountain youth camp. That's right, buddy.
So, that was it.
That's what camp I run.
That's right.
Yeah,
I run with
that's
the
my
Light on the
camp.
Mountain youth camp, the Galilee Baptist youth camp.
Yeah, praise God.
Oh, that's my
That
camp.
was my
praise
camp.
God.
That's my camp. So I took that on. That's my camp too. So if you
Yeah.
ask me, that's my camp.
Light on the Mountain.
That's my camp. So,
Yeah,
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That sounds just like
That does.
Brother Melton, doesn't it? I'm telling you, John Melton is one of the classic gentlemen of the.
Yes, sir.
Yes. yes, yes.
And he's a unique spirit
Yep.
of a man,
He
but
is.
he loves God. I don't know of anybody really that loves God the way that one of my college students trying to call me that loves God the way that John Melton does. An unbelievable guy. Unbelievable.
Went by back to Bethel a couple weeks ago and saw him again, and hadn't changed a bit.
Hadn't changed a bit.
One bit.
I'm telling you.
Man, so amazing.
He is as solid in what he has believed today as he ever was.
Yeah.
He hadn't backed up one iota, buddy.
He is not.
Has he?
No, sir.
I mean, he's
Sure has
a Lord's man for sure.
And I do appreciate, so when you guys had that podcast of talking about funny stories, I was kind of concerned, during the youth camp when Stephen Aldridge was telling some stories that there were a few I was concerned he was going to tell. So I
that
appreciate
you might have been somehow
Well,
a little bit connected
the
to.
reason I listened to the full podcast is I was concerned of some of the stories he might have told. So I appreciated his discernment. And so
you were there for some of the famed pillow fights.
famed pillow fights.
Yes,
But,
yes.
Let's just say, when, we're talking about podcasts not being available. I'm glad that social media wasn't around and all that stuff. So we're very grateful that wasn't
Well,
around during
that was back
mid
when
'90s.
that was back when men were women, men were women, and women were men. That's back when men were men.
I thought that was now.
Yeah, that's
It's a different type of pillow fight now. I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
This
mercy.
has devolved into a
Oh, it's
different type of
it's
podcast.
devolved. Is what it's done. Praise God. Hey, we're drinking today Red Barn Roasters coffee of the hazelnut flavor. This was given to us by the Harris family. We're sponsored today by the Harris family from Spartanburg, South
Hey.
Carolina. The hazelnut Red Barn Roasters. What do you think about that coffee, Matthew?
I like it. It's pretty smooth.
I think it is. Oh,
Yes, sir.
by the way, so I told the Harris girls, I said, when I get your coffee, I'm going to drop it on the ground and say, there's ground coffee. Amen. So I ground your coffee,
Grounded
girls.
the coffee.
It's a blessing. Hallelujah.
Now it's lower grounds.
Lower grounds coffee. That's right. We need to have our own brand of coffee. That worked for some people back in the day, didn't it?
Or didn't work. Again, one or the other. I don't know.
Well, here's what we're doing today on the podcast. Instead of just fooling around, we do have a point today. Brother Jason, years ago, became involved in politics with the Young Republicans in the state of North Carolina, and working out of the area there in Gastonia, of course, and then became politically active with a passion, just fell in love with it, and eventually was launched into a political career of his own, and now he is working in the faith-based political arena. And tell us a little bit about how you got involved in politics and what you're doing now.
Well, just quick. I did get involved early on with the Young Republicans as a teenager. I think at 18 years old, and just really believed in the principles of what the party believed, and less regulations, and honestly, growing up poor, I liked the idea of being able to just grow up and you could make of what you want of yourself. And I remember there was a guy going around, and he was knocking on doors around the neighborhood, and he was telling people, and he was like, the Democrat Party's trying to take these people off of food stamps. Or sorry, he said the Republican Party's trying to take people off of food stamps. And I remember thinking, well, man, I think it would be good to take people off of food stamps. I actually think that's a
Yeah.
great thing to be able to get people to where they're actually working.
Make it on their own.
Make it on their own. So I ended up looking into it and studying about that a little bit, and got involved, and ultimately ran for office and became a county commissioner in Gaston County. Actually was elected on my 30th birthday there in Gaston County. And
Were you the youngest county commissioner ever in Gaston County?
in Gaston County. And so that's where I'd originally met Mark Harris. I was county commissioner, met Mark when he was running for U.S. Senate. He came through the county and met up with him when he was running, and we stayed in contact. He didn't win the election for U.S. Senate. Tom Tillis won that, and he decided to run for Congress in 2016. And so we, stayed in contact, and he asked if I would help with that campaign, and so I did. Took some time off of work and went and helped him in that campaign, and we ran against an incumbent congressman. At that time, it was Robert Pittenger, and we came up 134 votes short in the primary.
I remember.
And so I went back to work, and Mark went back to his church, and everything was, we went back to normal. But when you come up, kind of 134 votes short, you kind of, he was continuing to pray about, what do I do? Is this something I continue to pursue or what? And ultimately, he felt that God continued to burden his heart to run again.
Right.
And so he did that. And he reached out, and again, we continued to stay in contact. And I had a decision to make when he decided to run again of whether or not I would be a part of that. And, when I took 9 weeks off from my business, well, that was far different than leaving the office for 9 months.
Yes, sir.
9 months, that's a very different commitment than
Right.
take 9 weeks off
Right.
to do this. And so
And you were in the insurance business.
that's right. So owned
You,
an agency.
no,
there in
you and your
Gastonia.
sister owned
We do.
your own agency.
That's correct. There in Gastonia. And, we had just found out we were pregnant with our 6th child about that time, and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And my wife said, you just need to do it. She said, this is the reason we got involved, is to get people like this elected to office. And I said, then let's do it. And so left the office and went and managed the campaign for Mark. And we did, one of the first polls that came out, we were down 33 points. And we were thinking, wow, this is crazy. And then the second poll came out, and I think we were down 32 points. So I guess it was a little bit of progress.
Yeah.
But I mean, we were underfunded. We outspent 3-1, so it wasn't even close. But long story short, we ultimately came back. I mean, just through engaging with churches and a strong grassroots campaign, we won that primary. And went into the general election against, at the time it was Dan McCready. And again, we were outspent probably 3-1. All the outside money from California, New York, I mean, it all came in, and we were just outspent just a crazy amount of money.
I think that's something a lot of people don't understand who are naive about the political arena and how things go. It is amazing special interests money that comes from other states into your local districts for Senate seats and for House seats.
Yeah, well, I mean, whenever they put that on the target list, and
Right.
this was a targeted district, and once they do that, then the money just flows in from all across the country.
Right.
And so they did that, and so this was one they wanted to take this seat for a couple of reasons, and so anyway, once we came through that and we won the race, and of course after we came through that and had some hearings, and the Democratic Party just fought that tooth and nail, and ultimately they ended up calling for a new election. But in December of that, we were still kind of in that in-between period. I got a call from Ralph Reed and the Faith and Freedom Coalition, and they had talked about to me about how important North Carolina was to them, and how this was kind of the epicenter of kind of the national scene in the political circle, and how North Carolina was going to be a target, and how really we were seeing everything. I mean, North Carolina was, we'd seen here, there was the target of the left, and how we, were seeing stuff with the transgender movement. We were seeing these larger cities, and we were seeing it going into our suburban areas, and we wanted to make sure that North Carolina didn't go completely blue, like that it didn't go completely to the left. And so he said, we want somebody on the ground to make sure that we keep evangelicals and Christians engaged and involved in the process. And so I went to Atlanta, met with them, and they just kind of sold me on the mission and said, this is what we want to do. So I came back and talked to my wife and said, look, we have a decision to make. Are we going to work with the campaign? Are we going to work with the congressional office, which at the time we fully still anticipated everything was going to go through and be confirmed? Are we going to go back to work in the private sector, or do we do this? And Shannon just had the response of, this is the reason we got involved in politics. I mean, some other people can do this other stuff, but the reason you ran for office and the reason you got involved is to get Christians engaged and to have churches engaged in the process and to make sure that that they're involved and that we're making a difference. And so she encouraged me to do it. And so as of January the 1st, I became the state director for the North Carolina Faith and Freedom Coalition. And so our goal, we're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization who just tries to work to have Christians and evangelicals and pastors and churches be more engaged in the political process. And we do that through our voter guides. We put our voter guides in churches. We do them through digital ads. We put them mail pieces. So really it's just getting the word out to targeted evangelicals and people of faith that we're trying to get to vote our values. How
did Faith and Freedom begin?
So it really birthed back in 2008. Ralph Reed had had a vision for that. I think there were some organizations that were they were good groups and they were doing some good things, but he wanted to have an organization that targeted directly to people of faith and kind of took a politically strategic view of how do we target Christians directly. And that's why we do a unique part of we go straight to them digitally through digital ads.
Right.
We do peer-to-peer texting. We're doing mail. We're doing a lot of the same stuff you see through normal political campaigns, but we're doing it directly to evangelicals and to Christians, and we're just taking the message directly to them.
Right.
And then we're trying to also bring in churches that do the same thing with our voter guides, but we just want to take the message directly to Christians.
Now, Ralph Reed's run for office himself, has he not?
He has. I think he ran in Georgia.
Yeah, he did. He did. And he was affiliated with Christian Coalition years and years and years ago. But so what is the goal for North Carolina Faith and Freedom?
So our goal, again, it's...
And I'm talking about not just you personally, but for engaging maybe some of our listening audience who says, hey, I might be able to spare 10 hours of my time a week to do something.
So our goal is to do a couple of things. We want to get them involved in between now and the election next year. We're going to knock on 350,000 doors. We're going to target, again, people of faith, identified evangelicals who are low propensity, mid propensity voters. We want to make sure that they get out and vote. So we're going to knock on their door. We're going to call them. We're going to send them text messages. We're going to send them emails. We're going to do all these things. The other thing you can do is, we want to get to Raleigh. We want to meet with our legislators. We want to send them emails. We want to kind of get off the sidelines when it comes to being engaged with our current elected officials to let them know what we're doing. I think the important thing for people to know is, we are in a fight. And I think coming off of the campaign for Mark, to me, it was ever clear, and I'll give you a couple examples that I'd written down that I think really illustrate kind of where we are right now. So, some national publications that we had. These are some articles they wrote about Mark. These are the headlines. One of them was anti-gay, homophobic pastor Mark Harris seeks congressional seat. That was a headline in a national publication. Another one was GOP congressional candidate said Jews and Muslims should convert to Christianity for quote-unquote true peace in the Middle East. Pastor who fought against a bar opening near a church and a school runs for office. North Carolina congressional candidate criticized for saying wives should submit to their husbands. GOP candidate under fire for saying women's first priority should be towards family and not career. Former pastor has history of preaching against homosexuality and transgender movement. We had scores of those types of headlines. The commonality between all of those headlines is none of those have anything to do with where Mark stood on immigration, health care, tax reform, schools, any of that.
No, it was a concerted effort to thwart his campaign by being phobic in their own right.
Yes, and it attacked his faith.
Right.
It came after him for things that he preached in the pulpit,
Which they would not have done to a Muslim.
never done to a Muslim, and that they wouldn't have done to anybody else. And what this wasn't even an attack just against Mark, but I fully believe, and I really believe this, that I think this was a message to any other pastors to say, beware, if anybody runs for office, we're coming after you.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
And I think this was a scare tactic to try to scare any other pastors. Hey, you need to stay on the sidelines. And we just can't afford to let them do that.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, for some it worked. I've talked to pastors since then who they saw some of the commercials, and you guys have seen the commercials that they ran against Mark where he preached about the home and stuff like that, where they twisted a lot of the stuff that he said.
Right. Lies.
Yeah, I mean, just blatant
lies.
And some people saw that, and it scared some pastors. Yeah. And I know some right now who they took down some of their live streams, that they were live streaming some of their church services. They were putting stuff on Facebook, their videos on their websites. And they took a lot of those things down because they were afraid that, well, man, maybe somebody could do that to me.
Yeah.
And my fear is if we do that, we've just ceded that ground to them.
Yeah,
we can't allow
pandering to them. Yes.
We're going to do that. And so in seeing the way that they attacked him, not attacked him for his stances on issues, but attacking him on his faith.
Yes, sir.
You realize at that point, our religious liberty is under attack. The people say, "Oh, it's a straw man argument." It's really not under attack. It really is.
It really is.
When pastors, their sermons are being subpoenaed out in Houston, when pharmacists are having to fill prescriptions with morning after pills and other things that against their will, and when taxpayers are having to fund abortions against their will, and wedding vendors are having to participate in same-sex weddings, against their beliefs, our religious liberty is certainly under attack. And I think we have to recognize that. And if we don't get engaged, at least at some level,
right,
then we're the ones to blame.
Right. Well, there's a lot of people who are disenfranchised with the whole process because of a whole lot of things that they've seen. But you can't stick your head in the sand and not realize that there is an agenda for destruction, and you have to be involved in some way. And at the least, vote. And there are a lot of Christians who don't even vote. And for us to believe that America was not founded on godly principles is to be self-deceived about our history completely. It was David Barton who made this statement. He said, for the first 150 years of our country's existence, the presidents of the United States regularly made it aware to the public in their speeches that the Bible had a place in our nation. And I quote to you from John Quincy Adams. He said, "It is shameful to be ignorant of what's in the Bible." That's what he said to the nation. And Andrew Jackson said, "The Bible is the rock upon which our republic rests." I wouldn't call Andrew Jackson a stalwart Christian, but at least he understood the importance of the Word of God in the foundation and establishment of our nation. Teddy Roosevelt, he's one of my favorites. He said this. He said, "The Bible is so much a part of our civic and social life that it would be hard to believe what we would be if these truths were removed." And we're getting to see the repercussions of the removal of the Word of God from our society now in the mass shootings and many other things that we're dealing with on the American landscape. FDR made this statement. He said, we can't read the history of America and our rise and development as a nation without reckoning with the place the Bible has occupied in the shaping and the advances of the republic in which we live. It's just an important part of the history of America to realize and understand that this is a nation that was founded on scriptural principles and on the Word of God. And even some of our founding fathers who were deists understood that if we use the Word of God as the foundation for law, that it will govern us and guide us in the right way. When you look at Blackstone's commentaries on the law, and that was, of course, some of the major influences upon our founding fathers, Blackstone was very clear about the importance of the scriptures and biblical legal direction. And there is a concerted effort today to erase that and remove that from our history. Here's a great book by William Federer. I've had the opportunity of being with him in a meeting or two and having some conversations with him. You know William Federer, you know who I'm talking about. He's written several books, several good books. This particular book is called America's God and Country. America's God and Country. And basically, it's an encyclopedia of Christian or religious quotes from men and women, for that matter, who have made impact upon American culture down through the years. It's a book that's worth your having. It's a great table read for the living room. It's a great piece of material. I would suggest that you get that. William J. Federer, America's God and Country. You can find it on Amazon or any good bookstore. Well, what do you think, Matthew? What do you think about all this?
I think it's good. I like it.
I like it too, yes, and we need more people to be involved.
We do.
You know, we got involved with the We Stand With God rally
Yes,
many years ago. The Lord laid that on our heart. We saw tens of thousands of people affected by what the Lord allowed us to do. To Him be glory and honor. But we hit at the right time. We hit in 2015, right in the inception of the campaign trail for the next presidential election.
Yes, sir.
And we're there again. We're here again.
Yes, sir.
And there's a lot of childish banter in Washington and a lot of absolute idiocy in what you've had the privilege of meeting AOC, have you not?
I have.
And I'm not asking your opinion, but I'm thoroughly unimpressed by just moronic misunderstanding of the process and how things go. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out we don't understand, And so I think we need to have some folks that really step to the plate and try to be a help and a blessing as Christians in this public arena. Jason, won't you tell us how we can get in touch with you and with North Carolina Faith and Freedom?
Yeah, well, appreciate that. And I will say, to kind of piggyback on all the quotes that you mentioned just now, it's important to remember those quotes from our founders, because oftentimes we
Right.
don't forget that, and we don't teach our kids that oftentimes.
Yes,
But I always remind everybody, anytime that they bring those quotes up, and anytime I hear a message where somebody goes back and reads the quotes from all of those other founding fathers that said that, another quote that I think is important for us to remember is the one by President Ronald Reagan, where he did say that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction.
It is.
He said, we didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United
Right.
States,
Right.
where men were free.
Yes, sir.
I think the fear sometimes for me is that we can't afford to live in the glory years of, wow, the founding fathers did this.
Yes, sir.
We've got to continue to leave our kids and grandkids a heritage.
Well, they have to be our launching pad.
We've got to pass that on to them.
Yeah.
And I fear that oftentimes we're not doing that. So I appreciate
Yeah.
what guys like you are doing,
Yes,
and through this podcast, by us sending that message.
Well, we intend to continue to do this, and we as a podcast family, we're going to hear more of these types of men that will be coming on. We've been scheduling some interviews with some good men who are involved in the political process, who are Christians, that I think would be great influences and inspirations to our people. And I think the founding fathers are really our launching pad. They're not our talking point.
That's right.
And if we realize that, we've got to stand where they stood and go from where they were, it'll help us.
That's good.
Edmund Burke was not he was not an American. He was an Irishman, if my memory serves me correct. But Edmund Burke made this statement. He said, all that tyranny needs to gain a foothold in any culture is for people of good conscience to remain silent and do nothing. That's all it takes, is if you just refuse to say anything,
Yes, sir.
just kind of, let things be, then what you love and what you cherish will topple eventually.
Yeah.
Albert Einstein made this statement. He said, the world is a dangerous place. And he said, it's not a dangerous place because of the evil that's in it. He said, it's a dangerous place because of good people who will do nothing about the evil that's in the world. And I think that's where we're at.
that's good.
I mean, by and large, most all of the citizens of America, every one of them in private, basically believe in the tenets of freedom and what you and I believe. Okay? Basically, all of them do. But they refuse to become confrontationally involved in what's going on in our culture and just hide away in the shadows. And it allows the few to take over where the masses should be. And we need to be in prayer for our nation. Righteousness exalteth a nation. Sin is a reproach to any people. And the effects of what we're seeing in our culture today, and the talk that we're hearing in our culture today, the violence that we're seeing in our culture today, is as a result, and I say this without apology, is as a result of a removal of God from the culture. And we need to be proactive and involved and seeking for the Lord to help our nation. Pray for our leaders.
Yes, sir.
Pray for them every day, whether you like them or not. Pray for them, that God would touch them. The heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord, and he turns it whithersoever he will. So pray. Our prayer can do much. But don't just pray, participate, and see God help you in the process. Some of you are gifted in this direction, and you like it. I personally don't like any of it. As far as the political processes are concerned, it's of no personal interest to me, and I have been involved, deeply involved, as most of you know. But it's not something I like. It's something I have done through the years because it is a necessity. And so get involved. For some of you, it will fit like a hand in a glove, and you'll enjoy it, as Jason has down through the years. Well, listen, we've come to the conclusion of a podcast, and I want to thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next week. But from the Higher Grounds podcast and from our crew, you keep pressing on the upward way. We'll see you next week. This podcast has been a joy today to bring to you, and I thank you, Jason, for coming on. Would you please give all the information that's needed to get in touch with Faith and Family?
Yeah, well, so we'd love to have anybody be a part of the organization. You can go to our website, ncfaithandfreedom.com.
Right.
Or you can find us on social media at ncfaithfreedom on Twitter, or you can find us on Facebook. I'm personally on Facebook or Twitter, so you can find me, and then I can link you to that. But regardless of what state you're in, we can get you plugged in with voter guides, get you plugged in with the organization, and just whatever you want to do. I mean, some people, they want to go to the state capitol. They want to go knock on doors. Some people want to make calls. Some people just want to have a voter guide they can share on social media. So whatever it is, we can get that to you, and whatever level of participation you're at, we can get that. So don't feel like you've got to do everything,
right?
But do something.
Right.
Get plugged in. If you have social media, share a voter guide. That way you can help educate other Christians and people of like faith to be involved. But go to our website, ncfaithandfreedom.com, and contact us through there, and we'll be glad to get you plugged in and get you some information.
I said Faith and Family a while ago. I meant Faith and Freedom, but
yes.
But we will definitely have our folks getting in touch with you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you
to the Higher Grounds podcast family.